Okay, NBC News is now reporting that the incoming Trump administration is planning a major operation that will target immigrants for several days following tomorrow's inauguration. NBC News reports that locations across the city of Chicago will be targeted, and that could start as early as Tuesday. In an exclusive interview with NBC's Kristen Welker yesterday, Trump wouldn't describe any details of the operation, but said mass deportations would begin very early, very quickly. Now, obviously, part of the goal here is to scare people. Part of the goal is to pick a fight with cities Donald Trump doesn't not like, especially blue ones. And part of the goal is to have cameras ready so that images of ICE agents arresting immigrants are blasted out on television and social media. And it's important to note that we have been down a version of this road before. You might not remember this, but back in 2019, Trump made a very big deal of previewing mass immigration raids by ICE. In a tweet that summer, he said ICE was about to begin the process of removing millions of undocumented immigrants. And people were understandably freaked out by that tweet. A couple of days later, his acting ICE director said that agents would start a deportation blitz, targeting more than 2,000 immigrant family members. But in the end, just 35 people were arrested as part of that operation. Now, a story like that is likely cold comfort, and for lots of families across Chicago and other big cities that are being mentioned in the news right now. Trump's incoming border czar has said that they will try to create a sense of shock and awe. So shock and awe is what we should expect them to try. But what they can actually accomplish is still very much an open question. Another open question is what states can do to fight back. Here's what Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker told NBC News after we learned about that potential operation in Chicago this week. He said, quote, "We have laws that protect people that are undocumented. I am going to make sure to follow the law. I am concerned that the Trump administration and his lackeys aren't going to follow the law." Joining me now is the Attorney General of Illinois, Kwame Raoul. It's great to see you. Thank you for taking the time. I'm sure it's a very busy time. So let me just start with the news, because the Washington Post reported last night, thank you again for joining me, that Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, is now reconsidering whether to launch immigration raids in Chicago this week after details leaked out. My guess is the immigrant community there is still very much on edge. But are you still preparing for this to start on Tuesday, and how are you preparing?
Well, the same way we've prepared on an ongoing basis. We here in Illinois have what is called the Illinois Trust Act, which mandates that local and state law enforcement cannot be used for immigration enforcement purposes. And so my job is to make sure that my law enforcement partners abide by the law of the state of Illinois, to make certain that no law enforcement department partakes in immigration enforcement. That is the job of the federal government. It's a job that's been done over several administrations, whether it's the Obama administration, the Biden administration, and the prior Trump administration. But local law enforcement should not be used for that purpose.
So it could still start on Tuesday, as far as you know at this point in time?
Correct. And I should note that unless there is a federal criminal warrant, local law enforcement cannot collaborate.
That's an important thing for people to understand, and that seemed to be alluded to in the governor's statement. You just talked about it. So when there's this reference, as the governor said, to his concern that the Trump administration and his lackeys aren't going to follow the law, what are you watching for in that regard? Is it them trying to pull in local law enforcement, or what do you have your eye out on?
Well, certainly, yeah. We have literally within the state hundreds of local law enforcement departments and local law enforcement leaders with certainly different political views. Some that are more aligned with the incoming president, and some who may be less so. But the law is the same for all. And so, notwithstanding what one's personal feelings may be, they're to abide by the law of the state of Illinois. One of the things that we're also worried about is, many immigrants, undocumented immigrants, are also victims of crime, and they're also witnesses of crime. And we have what's called the Voices Act to make sure that we protect those individuals and make sure they have an opportunity for U visas that our federal government has embraced, to make sure that victimized are not further victimized by immigration enforcement.
That's a very important point for people to understand. Help us also understand what legal protections you have at your disposal. You've mentioned a number of the laws here. If the Trump administration isn't following the law within these operations, what can you immediately do?
Well, we would have to seek relief through the courts. You know, we're not envisioning a situation where you have local law enforcement going up against federal authorities. It's important to note that I sit at the head of a law enforcement agency. I partner with local and state law enforcement and federal law enforcement, including Homeland Security, FBI, ATF, DEA, on an ongoing criminal investigations that might involve non-citizens, but also might involve citizens. The same approach should be used for citizens and non-citizens.
Some of the reporting is suggesting that obviously Chicago could be a part of the cities targeted. Also, Washington D.C., Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Denver could be in early targets. Are you coordinating with other attorneys general in those states as well? Obviously, the state laws are different, but is that something you're coordinating with them on in terms of response?
Yes, certainly. We've coordinated on many fronts in anticipation of the new administration coming in, as well as we've been doing so. I've been serving as Attorney General for the last 6 years. We've been doing so on a whole host of issues throughout my tenure, but certainly notwithstanding not knowing what the outcome of the November elections would be, we began communicating with one another as to what we might anticipate and how we may collaborate in preparation for such actions. We're told that the incoming president has some 100 executive orders. I don't know what exactly is in those executive orders, but whether it's immigration, environmental issues, civil rights issues, we have been anticipating that there may be an array of actions that may take place, which we may have to respond to.
The state attorneys general are such an important front to abiding by the law. Thank you so much for joining me and helping explain this to us. I really appreciate your time.